The story you are about to hear is not just about a young woman named Elisa Lam, nor is it simply about a single night in Los Angeles that ended in tragedy. It is a story that threads together nearly a century of shadows surrounding a hotel built with lofty dreams in the roaring 20s, a hotel that would slowly collapse into the darkness of crime, despair, and death. At the center of it all lies a mystery so unsettling that it still dominates internet forums, YouTube documentaries, and late-night conversations to this day. This is the story of Elisa Lam, the Canadian student whose final known moments, captured on a security camera inside an elevator of the infamous Cecil Hotel, became one of the most disturbing modern mysteries of our time. Hidden within those flickering frames of grainy footage lies a sequence of behavior that has sparked endless speculation. Was Elisa hiding from someone, communicating with something unseen, or simply in the throes of a mental health crisis? And when her body was later discovered in a rooftop water tank after weeks of frantic searching, the questions deepened to a level that defied explanation. Because behind her personal tragedy was the weight of a hotel with a long and gruesome history of death, serial killers, and whispered curses. And so the mystery of Elisa Lam cannot be told in isolation. It must be woven into the fabric of the Cecil itself, a place where dreams curdled into nightmares, and where the line between true crime and the paranormal blurred into something unforgettable. To understand how Elisa's life intersected with the Cecil, we must go back to the very beginning of this hotel's story. The Cecil Hotel was first opened in 1924. Built as a magnificent structure meant to attract business travelers and tourists in the thriving heart of Los Angeles. Its grand marble lobby, stained glass windows, and opulent architecture reflected the optimism of a city that seemed unstoppable in its growth. The Roaring Twenties promised success, glamour, and opportunity. The Cecil was marketed as a place of refinement and prosperity, an affordable luxury for those seeking a comfortable stay. But as history often shows, optimism can collapse quickly. Just 5 years after the hotel opened, the Great Depression struck, and the surrounding neighborhood began to decay. Downtown Los Angeles, once bustling with promise, slowly became overrun with poverty, crime, and despair. By the 1930s, the district had acquired the grim nickname Skid Row, a place where thousands of homeless people would eventually live in tents, shelters, or simply on the streets. The Cecil's fortunes sank with its surroundings. Guests who once arrived in suits and dresses were replaced by transients, runaways, and desperate individuals seeking a cheap room for the night. It was during these years that the Cecil began earning its dark reputation. In the 1930s and 40s, the hotel became a notorious hotspot for suicides. Guests leapt from upper floors, their bodies crashing onto the sidewalks below. Others ingested poison or shot themselves in their rooms. Newspapers began referring to it as the Suicide Hotel. The pattern continued for decades. Unexplained deaths, violent ends, and tragedies repeated in its halls. In 1962, for instance, a woman named Pauline Auden jumped from her ninth-floor window after an argument with her estranged husband. But in a gruesome twist, she landed on a pedestrian below, killing him instantly. Incidents like these etched themselves into the Cecil's reputation, and by the 1970s and 80s, the hotel had become synonymous not just with despair, but with evil. And then came the era of serial killers. Two of the most notorious murderers in modern American history, Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, and Jack Unterweger, an Austrian journalist turned killer. Both lived at the Cecil during their killing sprees. Ramirez terrorized California in the mid-1980s, breaking into homes, murdering and assaulting his victims with chilling brutality. Residents of the hotel later recalled seeing Ramirez return blood-stained, casually discarding his clothing into the hotel dumpster before heading upstairs. Jack Unterweger, decades later, used the Cecil as a base during his stay in Los Angeles. He presented himself as a reformed writer and journalist, but in reality, he was luring sex workers to their deaths. The fact that both men resided in the same hotel, decades apart, only deepened the Cecil's notoriety. It was no longer simply unlucky. It had become, in the eyes of many, cursed. By the time Elisa Lam arrived in 2013, the Cecil was rebranded as the Stay on Main, a budget option targeting younger travelers and international tourists. The management tried to distance the property from its sinister reputation, offering hostel-style rooms and affordable rates, but the shadow of its past lingered. The hotel was still surrounded by Skid Row, still frequented by the desperate, and still whispered about by locals who knew its history. Elisa herself was a 21-year-old student from Vancouver, Canada. She was intelligent, artistic, and deeply introspective. She studied at the University of British Columbia, though at the time she had taken a break from her studies. Her online presence, particularly her Tumblr blog, revealed much about her inner world. She wrote openly about her struggles with bipolar disorder and depression, about books she loved, clothing styles she admired, and the daily battles of being a young woman trying to navigate life. Her posts were a mixture of vulnerability and wit, optimism and despair. To those who later combed through her writings, they revealed both a vibrant personality and a mind weighed down by invisible burdens. In late January 2013, Elisa embarked on a solo trip to California. It was meant to be an adventure, a chance to explore, to see new places, and perhaps to shake off some of the heaviness she felt. She traveled by train, shared her journey on social media, and seemed genuinely excited to be on her own. Her parents were concerned but supportive, especially since she checked in with them daily. On January 28th, she checked into the Cecil, or rather, the Stay on Main. Initially, she shared a room with other female travelers, but according to reports, her roommates soon complained about her odd behavior. Hotel staff then moved her into a private room. What exactly that odd behavior was remains unclear, but it was one of the many unsettling details later dissected by investigators and internet sleuths alike. Just 2 days later, Elisa vanished. When she failed to check in with her parents, alarm bells rang. A missing persons report was filed, and police searched the hotel, but the search was limited. They could not check every room without probable cause, nor could they dismantle sections of the building without evidence. Weeks passed. Flyers with her photo were distributed. Her face appeared on the news, and then the elevator video was released. This footage, just a few minutes long, became one of the most infamous pieces of viral media in internet history. It showed Elisa entering an elevator, pressing multiple buttons in quick succession, then stepping back into the corner. She peeked outside the doors, darted back in, moved her hands in odd, almost ritualistic gestures. At times she appeared to be hiding from someone. At others, she seemed to be talking to someone invisible, or perhaps even playing a bizarre game. Her movements were erratic, her expressions shifting between fear, curiosity, and something more inscrutable. The video ended with her stepping out of the elevator, moving out of frame, and disappearing. The doors opened and closed repeatedly, as if the building itself were mocking her absence. The footage captivated the internet. Millions of viewers dissected it, frame by frame. Some insisted Elisa was fleeing an unseen pursuer. Others believed she was under the influence of drugs or experiencing a psychotic episode. Conspiracy theorists suggested paranormal activity, claiming she was interacting with a ghost or an evil presence tied to the hotel. The strange timing of the elevator doors, opening and closing without her pressing buttons, fueled these theories. The mystery had gone global. And then, the discovery. On February 19th, nearly 3 weeks after she went missing, guests at the hotel began complaining of low water pressure, odd-tasting water, and even dark discoloration. Maintenance staff were sent to the roof, where the hotel's large water tanks stood. Inside one of them, they found Elisa's body, naked, with her clothing floating nearby. She had been submerged for weeks. The horror was unimaginable. Not only had she died in a hidden place, but hotel guests had been consuming and bathing in the very water that held her remains. The autopsy report later concluded that the cause of death was accidental drowning. No drugs or alcohol were found in her system beyond her prescribed medication for bipolar disorder. But inconsistencies in the report, coupled with the bizarre circumstances, only deepened suspicion. How had she accessed the water tank? The rooftop was locked, with alarms meant to prevent unauthorized entry. The tanks themselves were heavy and difficult to open. Some argued she could not have climbed in alone. Others countered that in a distressed state, it was possible. The autopsy noted no signs of foul play, but the ambiguity left room for endless debate. And here, the story begins to branch into the labyrinth of speculation that keeps the case alive today. Some believed Elisa's death was linked to the hotel's violent history, that the Cecil itself was cursed and had claimed yet another victim. Others pointed to supernatural theories, citing the eerie parallels between Elisa's case and the 2005 film Dark Water, which depicted a young girl drowning in a water tank atop a haunted apartment building. Still others noted the strange coincidence of a tuberculosis test being administered to the local homeless population at the time, one whose technical name was Lam Elisa, a chilling coincidence that sent conspiracy forums into overdrive. Was her death part of some bizarre experiment? Was it a cover-up, or was it simply a tragic accident amplified by the haunted aura of the hotel? But the most compelling explanation, according to medical experts, lies in Elisa's mental health. Bipolar disorder, especially when left untreated or improperly managed, can lead to psychotic episodes. If Elisa had stopped taking her medication or adjusted her dosage, it might explain her disoriented behavior in the elevator. It might explain her decision to climb the rooftop, her actions in the final hours of her life. Yet, even with this explanation, the lingering strangeness of the video and the circumstances refuses to let the story rest, because logic alone cannot fully erase the unsettling imagery of her final moments, nor can it silence the chorus of voices who feel something else was at play. The cultural impact of Elisa's story cannot be overstated. The elevator video has been watched tens of millions of times. Countless YouTube channels have dissected the footage. Documentaries, including a major Netflix series, have revisited the case. Podcasters, bloggers, and amateur sleuths continue to debate the details. For many, Elisa's story is not simply a mystery to be solved, but a haunting reminder of the fragility of life, the stigma surrounding mental illness, and the way the internet can turn a private tragedy into a global spectacle. Even today, when you walk past the Cecil, now closed, though plans for redevelopment linger, you can feel the weight of its history pressing down. The grand lobby sits silent, its marble floors reflecting not just light, but memory. For nearly a century, the building has absorbed tragedy after tragedy, as if its walls themselves were recording human despair. Elisa Lam's story is only the latest in a long chain of darkness, but because of the internet age, it became the most visible, the most haunting, and it is perhaps fitting that her story, so tied to her online presence through her blog and the viral spread of her final moments, remains alive in the digital ether long after her passing. But as haunting as the unanswered questions are, the deeper resonance of Elisa's story may lie in the reminder of her humanity, behind the mystery, behind the theories and conspiracies. She was a young woman who loved books, fashion, and self-expression. She was a daughter who called her parents daily to reassure them. She was a traveler seeking adventure and connection. And in her story, we find both the fragility of life and the immense weight of the places we inhabit. The Cecil Hotel was not just a building, it was a stage where countless lives intersected with tragedy. Elisa Lam's life and death are now forever entwined with that history. And in telling her story, we are forced to confront the uncomfortable truth that some mysteries will never be solved. And yet, perhaps that is the very reason Elisa's story continues to echo. Because in the unanswered, in the shadows of that grainy elevator video and the silent rooftop water tank, we are left to wrestle with our own fears, our own fascination with the unknown. The Cecil Hotel stands as a reminder of how darkness accumulates over time and how one life, tragically lost, can illuminate the hidden corridors of both a building's history and our collective imagination. But the question that still lingers is this: what truly happened in those final hours? And why does the world remain so captivated by a mystery that may never be fully explained? The answer lies not only in the Cecil's past, but in our own need to find meaning in the inexplicable. And so the story of Elisa Lam will continue to haunt us, not because it is solved, but because it never can be.